Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with a very late best books of 2023 video, but I figured better late than never. You know, it's only February. I have a lot of videos coming out because I miss like all the end of year videos I normally do. So February is going to be like the month of video catch-ups, and then March we can like get back on schedule, you know? I'm here, best books of 2023, better late than never. Let's get into it. These are going to be in absolutely no particular order except for the very last one. I am going to save my best book of the year for the end. So the first one is Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. This was so good. I feel like I'm definitely more in my, I don't even know if I want to say like romance era, like I don't know, but I'm reading more romance than I usually do, but it's romance like this that's really it does something to me. Less fluffy romance, like just romance that has a couple more maybe serious topics or a little bit more depth to it. Like I love a good fluffy romance, don't get me wrong, at all, but they usually don't end up necessarily on my all-time favorites list or like favorites of the year even. Ones like this that kind of dive a little bit deeper, kind of push that edge more, a little bit more towards literary fiction in a way, are ones that definitely seem to stick with me a little bit more, just because I think I like the realistic nature of them and being able to connect with the characters a little bit more than super fluffy. But fluffy is fun, do not get me wrong, I love a fluffy romance. This was in no means like a perfect romance. It's not like an all-time favorite book of all time or anything like that, but it definitely was one of the better books that I read last year, and there's something about it that really stuck with me and I really enjoyed it. I have tried to sense read her sophomore novel. I think this was her debut, right? Her sophomore novel, which is Once More with Feeling. I can't get into that one. That one revolves around like famous singers, and this one was like kind of actors, but it didn't like focus on that a ton, whereas her next one, it really focuses on the fact that they're famous and their lifestyle being famous, and I'm just like not jiving with it. But Funny You Should Ask is an amazing romance, and I ate that shit up. Vox by Christina Dolcher. This book, this book surprised me in the wildest way. So I had heard of this book like literally I think once before. Like one booktuber at one point maybe lately mentioned this book. This came out in 2018. I was at my library's book sale that year, not 2018, whatever year I picked this up, 2020 I think or something. And I saw it and it was like $1. So I was like, oh, you know what? I have heard of that book before. You know, I don't own a lot of sci-fi. Let me pick it up and give it a shot. Picked this up on a whim, like bought it on a whim, then read it on a whim. I was just like, I'm craving a sci-fi, something dystopian, something out of this world, right? Like, take me out, please. And this ended up being a 5-star book. This is so underrated. It's wild. Came out in 2018. I'm like always on BookTube, I'm always on Goodreads, I'm always scoping what everyone's saying book news related. And I only had heard about this one time before. So this is a adult dystopian set. I'm actually not quite sure like how far in the future, but not that far in the future. And essentially women cannot speak. They have silenced women. You're only given like 100 words a day to speak, and there's certain things that you can't say, and it's all because the government pretty much got taken over by extremist right-wing conservative Christians, and they're, you know, the separation between church and state is just non-existent at this point, and they want to go back to a traditional husband, wife, man, woman type of household, and they want men to be the leader of the house, and they have decided to silence women to allow that to kind of happen again. And there's these little camps they have where if you're queer or if you try to take like your bracelet off, which is like a word counter, you go there. If you try to break the rules in any way, you go there. If you don't follow the typical ideas of what a woman is supposed to look like, from their perspective, you go there. And it's just really intense and it's really scary. It was hard for me to read in a lot of ways because if you live in the States, you know that it's a little close to home. There are a lot of people, really extremists, who have come out of the woodwork lately and are really trying to push those like core American values, that like traditional kind of household family that I feel like we've worked so hard to not be anymore. And so seeing this and knowing that a lot of people would probably read this book and like what it did, like what it had to say, I think is the most shocking part of this book. Is it's done in such a realistic way that I feel like you could see it happening in this country, which I think is terrifying. And I'm only talking about extremists here. Like they're like extremists. Sad that I know some people would eat this shit up as like non-fic. The ending was a little much. It was a little like Mission Impossible. Like you're like, it's going a little intense for me personally, but I think that it made sense for the story, so that's why I still rated it so high. But had it been like any other type of story or whatever, it would have like lost it for me. But I think it actually does work with what's going on here. But this was just an absolutely fascinating story. I think it was sad, it was enlightening in a way, it was just a wonderful look at what can happen if we let politics lean too far one way and we allow that separation of church and state to no longer exist. Like, I literally annotated the shit out of this, and normally I don't really annotate sci-fi much normally, just because I don't really have a lot to say, but I literally, like, there's so many points in here where I'm just like, literally, oh shit, I loved it. And it's not even a book that I would typically pick up, so that's what was so interesting. I was like, dang, maybe I am more of like a sci-fi girly than I think I am. Next, I have Cosmoknights Volume 2. I've waited like 5 fucking years for this book, but it was absolutely amazing. It was exactly what I needed, a follow-up to Cosmoknights. Cosmoknights is a gaze in space graphic novel, space pirate-esque kind of book, and it is so fucking good. And this sequel, like, I highly recommend this. I highly recommend this. Even if you're not normally a graphic novel type of person, this story is so good. If you're a sci-fi fan, like, queers in space, and it's just, like, it's literally iconic. So fantastic. And this sequel was just everything that I needed, everything I waited for. Waited years for this shit, and it did not disappoint. 5 stars, 5 stars, like both of them. I'm hoping there will be more, and maybe they won't take 5 more years to come out. That would be my hope. Otherwise, this story won't end until I'm like 50. And I'll wait as long as I need to. Like, I'm pretending like I'll be mad or like I'll stop reading. I'll still read them, but it's just annoying that I have to wait that long, you know? Then we have my all-time favorite romance of the year. Maybe of all time, actually. I gotta think about that one, actually. I've never thought about ranking all of the romance I've read. But this one's up there. At least top 3. At least top 3. Top 5. Top 3. That's hard. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Don't. Too much pressure. But at least 2023, my all-time favorite romance that I read this year was Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. And the God tier. God tier. S tier. Any top tier that you can even come up with would be this book. And again, this is a romance where it is fun. It is, you know, fluffy in ways. It is super cheeky and cute, but it does have some deeper parts of it. It does have a bigger discussion at hand. It does just, you know, talk about things that are a little bit more intense than you might find in just a fluffy romance. And I'm just drawn to shit like this. I'm telling you, I absolutely devoured this book. I loved it. I cherished it. Definitely an all-time favorite, period. And it's just so fantastic. The sun just went behind a cloud, so my bad. Next, 7 Hubbies of Evelyn Hugo. Like, of course this is going to be on the list. This is extremely, extremely popular, and I was scared that it would kind of fall into like that coho energy, you know? Because I had never read what's her name again? Taylor Jenkins Reid. I had never read from her before, and so I was like a little scared. But this is an absolutely beautiful story. The way this is written, she is such a talented author. The characters had so much depth to them, and I felt like I really connected to them. The ambiance of being in Hollywood, old Hollywood, you know, during that 50s, that 60s kind of era, she really hit that nail on the head with just, you know, creating that vibe of old Hollywood glamour and, you know, that type of lifestyle. The little twist literally had me shocked. I read this actually for a vlog, so I will link it up above somewhere. But at the ending, like, I recorded my reaction and I was just like in absolute shock. So I just think it was a lot of fun, and it was, you know, a really enjoyable and entertaining time, and I do recommend this. I think this is a popular book for a very good reason. If you're like nervous about it or think it's overhyped or whatever, I felt the same way, but it's actually really, really worth it. I think it deserves all of the hype that it gets. Then I have The Moth Keeper by Kay O'Neill. Kay O'Neill is the author of like the whole Tea Dragon Society, Dewdrop, Aquacorn Cove. These are all 5 stars for me, mind you, and I was so blessed enough to get an ARC last year of The Moth Keeper, which is their newest graphic novel, and it's just stunning. This was so beautiful. I feel like Kay O'Neill can do absolutely no wrong. Not only are the illustrations just so warm and comforting, they always feel like a Studio Ghibli to me, particularly Hayao Miyazaki. I feel like that art style, that whimsical kind of magical fuzzy feeling that they embody, I think that Kay O'Neill does that as well in their graphic novels, and it's just like a warm hug. Like, I love the art style, and then the whole plot and the ideas, the characters, the concept behind their stories is also very magical and whimsical and just so unique, and I love them so much and I cherish them so much. I have yet to find one that I don't, well, not even to find one. I've read everything they've ever come out with, and I've loved every single thing. This wasn't my all-time favorite of their works in particular. I don't know why I'm like obsessed with Aquacorn Cove. I feel like that one got, you know, kind of swept under the rug, but there's something about that one, I love it so much. And then obviously the entire Tea Dragon Society is so near and dear to my heart. I love that series so much. So it's not an all-time favorite, The Moth Keeper, but the story was so touching and so beautiful and so fantastic in just such a nice, I always keep saying, I keep coming back to cozy, but that's really how it felt. It felt like a warm cup of tea. Like, it's just so sweet, and I love it, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you liked the Tea Dragon Society, then you're going to like this. It's very similar, same author, so very similar, but beautiful nevertheless. Then kind of shocking, I can't remember the last time that I've had a thriller on it, like an all-time favorites list or like a yearly favorites list. Thrillers haven't been doing it for me the same way they used to, but I got really lucky last year with Final Girls by Riley Sager. This is another one that I read for a reading blog, so I will link that up above, but this book threw me for a fucking loop. It's so funny. If you watch that blog, I'm literally like in the kitchen doing stuff, and when all these big reveals happen, I'm just shocked. This is a amazing thriller. It is so well done. It is so gripping. It is extremely thrilling. Like, it fits the genre perfectly. It is everything that I've been missing in other thrillers and mysteries that I've picked up lately. But Final Girls was absolutely like mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing. It was such a good thriller. Next is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I don't do memoirs. I barely do nonfiction. I would prefer to not ever do nonfiction personally. It's not for me. Tell it to me in a podcast. Make a movie, a documentary about it. I don't do well with nonfiction works in a book format, medium, you know? It's not how I absorb that information best. Memoirs especially, though. So I even was surprised that I enjoyed I'm Glad My Mom Died as much as I did. I think it's because I heavily relate to it. I have mommy issues. I don't have a good relationship with my mom. I honestly never have. And reading, I've never been in Hollywood, you know, that all was new and very interesting, you know, especially growing up, you know, being a 90s baby, growing up then with Nickelodeon and stuff. It was really interesting to just, you know, read about what it was like for the actors of that time. But most importantly in this story, my takeaway was her relationship with her mom and learning how to create healthy boundaries and stand up for herself and, you know, love herself and not need to feel that kind of validation from a parental figure, even though that's kind of, you know, you're told from a young age that that's what you should do or supposed to do or whatever. Sometimes that's not the healthiest thing to do. So in that sense, I think the book, for me, it was like personal. Like, there were elements to it that I really related to and things that really helped me, and I think that that's why I'm giving it such a high rating. I think it deserves 5 stars. I think, you know, a lot of people seem to really, really enjoy this. I don't think you have to relate to her in that way to give it a high rating. I don't think it's one of those books where it's like, oh, it's particularly more for, you know, this type of person. I don't think that's the case. I just think for me, someone who normally hates memoirs, having one where there were a lot of elements that I saw of myself in it, I think I was able to kind of, it was almost more like self-help for me in a way. Like, it was kind of like, oh, that's a good way to look at that, or yeah, I never thought about, you know, how bad that is, or whatever, you know, like it was almost more like self-help in a sense for me. And in that way, I think that the story is just so important for people who have, you know, hard relationships with their parents, or setting boundaries with people, or, you know, this book really talks about eating disorders a lot. So that's a huge part of the book as well. I really appreciated it, and I think it took a lot of courage for her to do, especially because she's not really in the industry anymore. So for her to just kind of, you know, step out and be like, I'm gonna disclose all this information, was just kind of a badass move. So definitely one of my favorite books of the year, mainly because I think it was so surprising to me. It was so surprising that I enjoyed it as much as I did. Then I have Gemina and Memento kind of together. They were both 5 stars, but I'm just kind of throwing them together because I did finish the Illuminae series. Those two were definitely 5 stars. Obsidio, unfortunately, was like a 2.5, 3 star. That just ruined it for me, but Gemina and Memento were so good still, and so I do have to give them, you know, some praise. Memento is a prequel, and Obsidio is the sequel to Illuminae, and I think for what they were, you know, what they set out to do, I think both of them were fantastic. I think Memento sets up Illuminae perfectly, and there's a lot of Easter eggs in there, and it's just so much fun. It's a little, you know, novella. I think it's like 60 pages on Kindle or something, so it's super short. And then Obsidio is just a great follow-up to Illuminae, and it follows kind of the same kind of like formatting, and, you know, it's a good follow-up to the plot to help, you know, set up a good foundation for Obsidio, the third and final book, to happen. Unfortunately, like I said, that one flopped, but I do have to give credit to the two that kind of helped set it up, because they tried their best. They did. Then A Room of One's Own. I have been putting off reading this for so long. It's a classic. It's nonfiction, which, you know, I don't really normally do that, but Virginia Woolf is such an icon, and this book is so important, and it's really transformed a lot of women, and I just felt like it was an important one for me to read in my lifetime, and just, you know, get that inspiration and hear what she had to say. This is actually, A Room of One's Own was originally a speech. This essay is based upon 2 papers read to the Art Society at the Newnham and the Otta at Girton. Do I even know how to read? In October 1928. The papers were too long to be read in full and have since been altered and expanded. It's pretty much about women in fiction, and it kind of goes into more than that, though. Like, even if you're not a woman in fiction, a woman trying to write, there's so much to take away from this just in any career that you might be in, or even if you don't have a career. It's just really empowering, you know, to hear what she has to say about women's place in society. And it's kind of sad because this book was, what, when did it say, 1928? So we're talking like 100 years here. 100 years. And yet there's not that much of a difference. Things have changed, don't get me wrong. But it's kind of sad how relevant so much of what she has to say still is today. I loved it so much. I need not hate any man. He cannot hurt me. I need not flatter any man. He has nothing to give me. Re-fucking-tweet, Miss Wolf. Re-fucking-tweet. It's just, there's so many things in here that are just so empowering for women, and just so many reminders of the ways that we have been oppressed in society, and still are to this day, and the way that has kind of warped our brain even still. And then she also dives into queerness a lot. It was like towards the end of the book she started discussing these things, and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. It's like the 1920s. Like, she was a bold woman to just be saying these things, and I applaud her for it 1000%. Let us admit in the privacy of our own society that these things sometimes happen. Sometimes women do like women. Exactly. But almost without exception, they are shown in their relationship to men. It's strange to think that all the great women in fiction were, until Jane Austen's day, not only seen by the other sex, but seen only in relation to the other sex. And how small a part of a woman's life is that? Like, this book, it's tiny. Like, read it. Read it. Read it. Read it. Do it. Do it. I'm not even kidding. Like, I will peer pressure you. And obviously it is discussing feminism in a way that's not entirely inclusive. She doesn't bring up, you know, women of color. She doesn't bring up the fact that they are even treated worse than white women. You know, that's not discussed. That isn't, you know, brought to the surface, which obviously is a huge part of feminism and needs to be discussed at large every time feminism is discussed. But I think if we just acknowledge that it's not the most inclusive, but still are able to take things away from it, that's where change happens. I absolutely love it. Highly recommend. Then we have the best book I read all year. That's my matcha. The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. I read this book for the same reading vlog that I read Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And that was a reading vlog to see if books would make me cry. I'm like tearing up thinking about this book. This book made me absolutely sob. This book made me like, I was unwell for like 2 weeks after finishing this book. I instantly watched the movie. The movie is not like very good, and still that made me bawl just because the characters, like I'm so connected to the characters that seeing them again made my heart hurt so bad. This book is one of the most, if not the most, one of the most beautiful books I have ever read in my entire life. This book is literally life-changing. The way that this book made me feel, the way that it made me look at my life, it's life-altering. We are in Nazi Germany in 1939. I couldn't remember the exact year. Liesel is our main character. Her and her brother go on this train to go live with this other family because their mom is getting taken away, essentially. Not because they're Jewish, she's communist. And so, you know, obviously she's getting taken away, so she goes and gives the kids to this other family. Her brother dies on the way there. That's literally not a spoiler. It's literally, it's right here. It's right there. So not a spoiler. Her brother dies on the way. It happens in the first 2 pages. And she goes to live with this family. They end up, you know, having to learn how to become this family, all the while living in Nazi Germany and having all these rules to follow and all these things to do. And she's going to school. She's one of the like Hitler youths. And so she's like getting trained how to do all these things. And meanwhile, the family that she's living with are actually sympathizers. And so they end up hiding a Jewish man. How old is he? He's like 18, I think, or something like that. And they end up hiding him. Again, not a spoiler, babes. It's in the synopsis. And so it's just kind of her tackling with that because she's this young girl, right? She's very impressionable and she's being told, you know, this thing at school, right? She's like literally being raised as like a Hitler youth. And then she goes home where they're hiding a Jewish boy in the basement. And it's just like, you know, learning her thoughts and her feelings about this and just kind of seeing it play out is just one of the most heart-wrenching things I've ever gone through. And what makes it even harder and what makes this book stand out so much is it's written from Death's perspective. So it's not written from Liesel's perspective at all. It's written from Death. Ugh. The artistic ability that takes and the beauty and sadness combined that happens from using that method is just like, I can't. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever read, like I said. And if you haven't read this, where you been, Loca? Because this is literally one of the greatest pieces of fiction. How beautiful, like Death says, that's the sort of thing I'll never know or comprehend, what humans are capable of. How could that woman walk? How could she move? She picked him up and continued walking, the girl clinging now to her side. Like, Death is impressed and taken aback by humans' ability to deal with the things that we deal with day to day. And I think that's just like, it's just so beautiful, and just from Death's perspective changes the book entirely. And I don't even want to think about this book anymore. I don't, just stop. It's like so good that I don't want to think about it because I'll just start crying. Anyways, those are the top 11 books that I read in 2023. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment down below if you have read any of these or what your favorite books were, because I need some new recs. Now that I've gone through my, you know, Goodreads TBR, I think it's under 100 now, which is crazy, my want to read. I need some new ones. So let me know what your faves were. If you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts on them. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.